the country's capital. Tonight of all nights, Anne Wairimu is our sign language interpreter. Good evening. TV47 News Tonight with me, Abu Bakr Abdullahi, begins right now. Let's get to our top story. It is too early to determine whether or not the COVID-19 curve is going down. This is according to the Ministry of Health after claims that the curve is going down due to a recent drop in infections witnessed in the past few days. This as the number of COVID-19 cases in the country rose to 30,636 after 267 more people tested positive for the virus. Zainab Mohammed begins our broadcast tonight.
In the past few days, the country has continuously witnessed a drop in the number of COVID-19 infections reported in a period of 24 hours, from numbers as high as over 600 cases in a day to less than 300 cases in a day, a trend that has raised concerns across the country, with conclusive sentiments that the Kenyan curve is finally going down. However, the Ministry of Health warns that it might just be too early to determine whether or not the curve is dropping.
It's too early for us to be able to make any determination whether this is a trend, at least for the curve coming down.
According to the Health CIS, Dr. Rashid Aman, there are specific indicators used by the Ministry of Health to make such a determination over a long period of time.
The strongest indicator really is people who get hospitalized because of COVID-19 and people who actually die from COVID-19.
The ministry further says issues with testing kits, sample size, targeted mass testings and contact tracing could play a huge role in the dropping numbers.
When we have enough testing kits and supplies, we are able to ramp up our testing. And you know, testing, the number of cases that you unearth is also a factor of the number of samples, the size of the samples that you collect.
This is as the number of COVID-19 cases in the country rose to 30,636 cases after 271 more people tested positive for the virus in the last 24 hours. 208 patients have recovered from the disease after receiving treatment from various hospitals across the country, as 5 more people succumbed to the virus. For TV47, I'm Zainab Mohammed.
Elsewhere, approximately 155 people living in the Dadaab refugee complex have contracted COVID-19 since the first case was reported in Dadaab in May. This is according to Garissa Governor Ali Korane, who said up to 80% of the 194 cases in Garissa County are from Dadaab. This as the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, donated personal protective equipments for medical staff working in the Dadaab refugee complex. David Muroka reports.
3 months since the COVID-19 disease penetrated the porous borders of the Dadaab refugee complex, approximately 155 people have tested positive for COVID-19 there. This is according to Garissa Governor Ali Korane, who revealed that up to 80% of the 194 confirmed COVID-19 cases in the northeastern county are from Dadaab.
In terms of the infections in the county, 80% of the infections in Garissa County are from the refugee camps, the Dadaab complex.
However, Korane has insisted that the county government is up to speed in its preparedness to deal with COVID-19 in Garissa.
Currently, we have 294 isolation beds, including those which are in the refugee camps. We have 108 beds facility which is getting completed this week. And we are going to start another facility for 50 more beds, which will take 3 weeks.
While echoing the governor's sentiments, Health CAS Dr. Rashid Aman has said the condition in Dadaab is under control.
We have systems of monitoring, we have the testing systems, networks that we have put in place And so we do follow up.
This as the Regional Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, donated personal protective equipment, otherwise known as PPEs, to frontline caregivers working in Dadaab.
Our regional response is specifically based upon internally displaced people, refugees, as well as the returnees and the urban vulnerable population and pastoralists as well. So we are working very closely with member states, all 7 member states.
David Muthoka, TV47.
Thank you, David Mudhoka, for that report. Moving on, Kakamega Senator Cleophas Malala, Samburu Steve Lelegwe, and Christopher Langat of Bomet have been released after their controversial arrest on Monday. Their release coming as a section of leaders condemned the government for using the police to intimidate senators opposed to the revenue sharing formula. Eli Logova tells us more.
Chaos were for the better part of Tuesday morning, witnessed in Mumias after residents engaged the police in running battles demanding the release of Kakamega Senator Cleophas Malala. Malala was later freed without conditions. His release came after the Director of Public Prosecutions dropped charges against him. Senator Malala has vowed to defend his stand on the controversial revenue sharing formula that has seen division in the Senate.
I will still be in that house whatever day to vote as per the wishes of the people of Kakamega. And this is my stand on this matter. One, that we cannot have a divisive nation. We cannot have a country whereby half of the country is benefiting and another half is losing. We've said this time and again, and we've insisted on this point, that we need to have a win-win formula in this conversation.
The Law Society of Kenya has accused the government of using security officers to settle political scores against those opposed to state policies. LSK President Nelson Harvey warned continued use of police officers to intimidate political leaders was a recipe for disaster ahead of the 2022 general election.
We condemn the action on the part of the police, but way forward, the Director of Public Prosecution has directed that there is no reason as to why the senator should continue being held, and I believe as a lawyer I can state affirmatively the decision by the Director of Public Prosecution is informed by the fact that there can be no valid charge in the manner in which it was intended by the police here.
Deputy President William Ruto has lauded the formation of a bipartisan Senate committee to end the revenue sharing stalemate. However, DP Ruto fired shots, saying the abuse of police and the criminal justice is not the reasons why millions of Kenyans voted for the Jubilee government. ODM leader Raila Odinga, through a statement to newsrooms, slammed the use of force to intimidate and create room for chaos. Raila urging the state to tone down the ethnic and regional rhetoric and diffuse the tensions that bubbled to the surface over the county revenue sharing formula. Bomet Senator Christopher Langat and his Samburu counterpart Steve Lelegwe were also released after recording statements with the police. The 3 senators were arrested Monday, a day when the Senate was to make a key decision on the county sharing formula. Eli Logova, TV47, Nairobi.
And still on matters revenue sharing, Deputy President William Ruto has praised the formation of a mediation Senate committee to seek a consensus on the revenue sharing stalemate. DP Ruto said a win-win consensus is an indicator of great wisdom and leadership. Senate formed a 12-member committee to mediate the revenue standoff, as Joash Onsare now explains.
The Deputy President, Dr. William Ruto, through his Twitter account, has said the move taken by senators to constitute a committee to reach a win-win consensus on county allocation formula is great wisdom and leadership. Ruto further says the abuse of police and criminal justice officers to bully citizens and intimidate leaders is wrong. The committee that was formed during the Monday sitting consists of Senators Johnson Sakaja, Mohamud, Stewart Madzayo Mwachiru, Kipchumba Murkomen, Mutula Kilonzo Jr., Susan Kihika, Samson Cherargei, Moses Kajwang, Anwar Oloitiptip, Moses Wetangula, John Kinyua, and Ledama Olekina.
Both the committee and the Committee on National Security will inform us of what is happening, so that as we reach next week, there will be no cloud surrounding our debate over this very important issue. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that is all I have to say, because if I say anything else, it will be beyond what has been agreed.
Arrest and this session at all. There is no connection at all. Those are issues.
Malala was in the opposition. He was among the only few senators that voted to get you 42 votes, Mr. Speaker, to become in that chair. Senator Lalekwa and Senator Lalakat were among the 42 people who voted for you to be the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you sacrificed me. You sacrificed Susan Kihika. Don't sacrifice Kenya.
The committee was formed after the House failed to agree on resolving the disputed formula that saw the 9th adjournment of the House proceedings. So far, 4 senators have submitted motions of amendments to the House. Senators Sakaja and Wetangula are the co-conveners of the team. On Tuesday met to set the ground rules for the discussions. The Senator Majority Leader Samuel Pogisio has said the sitting will resume once the committee has come up with a way forward on the county monies.
Does not call a special meeting unless we are ready. So that we don't say we are calling this meeting on Tuesday. Let us just make sure when we call a special meeting, we call it for that one meeting.
Monday's sitting hit on a hard rock after the arrest of 3 senators on different accounts of allegations. Joash Onsare, TV47, Nairobi.
Thank you, Josh Onsare, for that report. Jamia Mosque today reopened its doors after closing for 5 months due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Muslim faithfuls observed their noon prayers today under the strict guidance and conformity to the Interfaith Council guidelines. Muhammad Ali reports.
It has been 5 months of waiting for the Muslim faithful who pray at Jamia Mosque, Nairobi. The mosque opened its doors earlier today following the revised Interfaith Council guidelines that increased the number of worshippers from the earlier 100 limit per session. The management of Jamia Mosque pointed out some of the directives that include the wearing of masks and coming with ablution done, as the ablution and toilet areas remain closed. Worshippers were also forced to carry their prayer mats, as the initial mats were removed and the floor marked well in order to observe the 1.5 meters social distancing rule. It was, however, a harvesting day for business people who sell mats near the mosque. Those who did not have their prayer mats were forced to buy one from the traders. The mosque opens 15 minutes before prayers and closes its doors 15 minutes after prayers. Those who came late and did not get an opportunity to pray inside the mosque were forced to observe the Dhuhr prayers outside the mosque. Jamia Mosque has the capacity to host 10,000 worshippers on a normal day, but due to COVID-19, the numbers have been reduced to 1,350, as directed by the Interfaith Council. Muhammad Ali, TV47, Nairobi.
Elsewhere, following the move by the Kenya Bureau of Standards, KEBS, to lift the ban on the importation of second-hand textile and footwear in the country, popularly known as mitumba, traders in the sector have had a sigh of relief. However, the traders want some of the restrictions eased, as Nanok Lorraine found out in the Gikomba market.
In the Gikomba market, traders are up and about selling their products. And although KEBS lifted the ban on importation of second-hand clothes, they will have to practice a 45-day wait before commencing the importation. Since the importation ban was implemented, traders in Gikomba have been incurring losses amounting to 2 million shillings. However, mitumba importers have already begun the registration exercise with KEBS.
Kuna 45 days kutoka Sunday ndio hiyo mtumba ianze kuingia. Na lazima pia tufuate mikakati ya KEBS yenye serikali pia KEBS ilitoa. Kwa hivyo within those 45 days kutoka Sunday mtumba itakuwa inaingia. Watu wengi wamekimbia pia huko, ama umetuma representative akakurepresent huko. Lazima pia ujiandikishe ndio ufuate ile mikakati KEBS inaleta. Huwezi kosa ati kuleta mtumba saa hii na wewe hujajiandikisha, itakuwa ngumu.
As they continue to adhere to COVID-19 containment measures, protocols such as reduction of bail mass from 45 kgs to 30 kgs has not been welcomed by many. Those importing mitumba bills have lamented on the matter, saying if the 30 kg bail protocol is implemented, they will incur huge losses due to the fewer items.
Mtumba my rent, mtumba my food, mtumba my everything. Kwa hivyo ifunguliwe. Tutafuata vile wanataka, lakini the 30 kgs, no, it is a no to me.
The sale of mitumba undergarments and towels has been banned in a bid to curb further spread of the virus.
Ni vizuri iwe inakaguliwa vizuri, lakini muda huo wote jameni tumekuwa tukivaa, wamekuwa wakivaa. Sitapigwa dawa na sitaendelea na mambo iendelee sawa.
Although the importation of used textiles and footwear has resumed in the country, traders are lamenting the reduction of mass of these items from 45 kgs to 30 kgs, a move they have strongly opposed. Reporting for TV47 from Gikomba Market, my name is Nanok Lauren.
Thank you, Nanok Lorraine, for that report. You are watching the county's television, TV47. We are taking a short break here on TV47 News Tonight with me, Abu Bakar Abdullahi. You can be part of this broadcast. Send us a message on 22047. The hashtag to use on Twitter is TV47 News. We'll be back with much news after this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to TV47 News Tonight with me, Abu Bakar Abdullahi. Thank you for, as always, choosing to stay with us. Let's get to more news. And police on Tuesday stopped a meeting convened by the Kenya Human Rights Commission for survivors of Solai Dam tragedy that claimed over 40 lives 2 years ago. KHRC Executive Director George Kegero said the meeting was to strategize on how to prepare evaluation reports, which the Commission intends to use as evidence in a case it has filed before court against the owners of the ill-fated dam.
Years ago, but we've been told that we can't meet them. The police have prevented the meeting from taking place, and they were going to use tear gas or violence to disperse the meeting. The objection by the police is that we did not notify them to hold this meeting. We object to that. We don't agree with the police and finding that we needed to notify them to hold this meeting. This is because the Kenya Human Rights Commission has filed a case in the High Court for the victims of the tragedy.
Elsewhere, more than 20,000 farmers are set to benefit from the Bunyala irrigation scheme, which transcends from Busia to Siaya County following a mega expansion plan of the scheme. The expansion will see the inclusion of new tech canals and a new diversion and dikes. The project by the National Irrigation Authority is set to be completed by December 2022.
The major expansion of the Bunyala irrigation scheme by 5.3 billion shillings by the National Irrigation Authority seeks to address the recurring challenges of floods that have affected the scheme's full potential. The project cuts across the counties of Siaya, Busia, and targets to put an extra 10,000 acre piece of land under irrigation in Phase 1, while another 10,000 acres will be irrigated in Phase 2. The National Irrigation Authority project aims to benefit 20,000 farmers up from initial 2,000. It will entail construction of a new intake canal, new diversion wire, and dikes.
During the design, it was very clear that even if we do the irrigation project in Siaya and we don't do the dikes, then the project is not sustainable per se, because every time it floods, farmers will have to move away, mostly especially in Busia. Maybe Siaya is not very serious per se.
According to the scheme manager, structures on Phase 1 are almost complete and will improve irrigation efficiency, hence increased yields and food security in the region.
It is a project that is not entirely rice. It is both food security and wealth creation project, where on the food security we are targeting to do the rice in the lower ridges, that is in the lowlands, and the rice is taking about 60% of the total acreage, so it's about 6,000 acres currently, where we are also, because we anticipated that once they will become on board, so we have already trained the farmers to be able to do 2 crops in a year. So currently in the existing Bunyala irrigation scheme, we are doing 2 rice crops in a year. So that essentially means that if you have 6,000 acres, then we can comfortably talk of 12,000 acres in a year, because we'll be able to utilize it twice.
Farmers are exuding confidence in the project, saying it will address their woes, including perennial flooding.
Sisi kama wakulima, hasa wakulima wa Budalangi, iyo in case kuna floods, huwa inatuaffect kabisa. Kwa mfano kama huu msimu, tumekuwa na floods ambapo nuclear main scheme already mchele ulikuwa umefikia ile stage ya booting, so floods vile zilikuja zikaosha.
Farming has helped the community in a big way, in families paying for their school fees, managing their day-to-day affairs in feeding, and also making sure that the farmers have their own houses. Many of the houses you can see around here, the corrugated iron sheets are for farmers. So I can say farming has helped in a big way.
Mimi niko na shamba, hata saa nyingine naweza enda kutafuta kazi kwa shamba zingine. Kama sina pesa naweza fanyia mtu nipate pesa ya kusaidia watoto, hata kununua chakula, kulipia watoto school fees na vitu vingine tu vile za matumizi kwa nyumba.
The Bunyala irrigation scheme was operationalized in 1969 and is the source of livelihood to many residents of Budalangi and some parts of Alego Usonga constituency. The scheme falls under the Lower Nzoia irrigation scheme.
Elsewhere, Trans Nzoia County has recorded over 11,000 cases of teenage pregnancies in the last 1 year. This is according to the report of a survey conducted by the County Department of Health Services that was released today. Boniface Baraza has the details.
Speaking during the launch of Inua Jamii initiative, Trans Nzoia Deputy Governor Dr. Stanley Tarus expressed fears that if drastic measures are not taken, teenage pregnancies will surge beyond 11,000 cases that have been reported so far.
Today, 11,000 children or girls pregnant in Trans Nzoia. The Ministry of Health, can we have the data for every ward? I'm also directing that all girls who are pregnant and boys who have made them pregnant undergo counseling to be provided with social protection and allowed to resume schools with no victimization.
Many girls are said to have fallen prey while trying to get sanitary towels.
When we sat and listened to these girls, most of them actually fall prey because they do not have sanitary towels, mafuta ya kujipaka, and those small things.
The Health Committee chairperson in the County Assembly, Daniel Kaburu, challenged the county leadership to empower youth through programs that will keep them busy during this pandemic.
As a county, let's also impress youth financing so that these people are always engaged, so that they also don't just appear idle.
Tuhakikishe kwamba kuna filamu ambazo zinatembea kwenye mitandao. Tuangalie kisawasawa ni filamu gani ambazo zinaweza pewa jamii kuangalia.
Teenage pregnancy is coming at the time when we have all our focus on COVID-19, and the effect of COVID-19 has now been the reason of early pregnancy.
Chiefs and their assistants have also been warned against entertaining teenage pregnancies in their areas of jurisdiction.
Deputy County Commissioner Security Committees zao tuko na jukumu ya kuhakikisha tuna deal na wale wanafanya mambo haya, na number 2 we prevent. That is why hatuta entertain mahali ati dhuluma hiyo itakuwa kubwa and we assistant chief na chief there is nothing they are doing about it, then we will not have a job to do.
Boniface Barasa, TV47, Trans Nzoia County.
The World Health Organization, in conjunction with the Mombasa County government, have launched a community engagement program on COVID-19. These and other stories. This is our county's roundup.
The World Health Organization is implementing the awareness project through Mewa Hospital and a community-based organization known as the United Front in Mombasa. Mewa will be disseminating information in Jomvu, Changamwe and Kisauni sub-counties, whereas the United Front will be going rounds in Mvita, Nyali and Likoni sub-counties.
And the reason why we are flagging off the vehicles is to go out and pass the message regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. We want our communities to be aware of what is happening.
In Murang'a County, the county water service provider company is working on a 1.2 billion shillings water supply project destined for its fast-growing Kenol town.
Kenol, we are serving it from Kadara Bark, from Kadara tank. We have a big tank of 1,200 meter cubed. We have a line that is 24/7 to Kenol, though once it reaches Kenol, because the distribution lines are many, we are also rationing it once it is in Kenol.
Elsewhere, over 100 booksellers from the Mount Kenya region have lost over 2 billion shillings after the academic year was considered lost due to COVID-19 pandemic. The chairman Booksellers Association in Mount Kenya region, Lawrence Mudhiga, said the problem started in March and the books and stationery supplied in learning institutions have not been paid. The association is now calling on the government to service them with loans at low rates to keep their business running. And finally, Machakos County, the Machakos High Court Deputy Registrar Kipchumba Kenei will tomorrow give direction on a mascalinous application brought up by the prosecution, seeking the court's nod for extension of time to continue holding 9 suspects for the murder of a 55-year-old woman. Immaculate Oma, TV47, Nairobi. From
the counties where it matters on the county's television, you're watching TV47 News Tonight with me, Abu Bakar Abdullahi. Time for us to take another short break. When we come back from the break, We'll make sense of the county revenue sharing debate and formula. You can be part of that discussion. Tweet us. The hashtag to use is TV47 News. Text us on 22047. We'll be back with that discussion after this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to TV47 News Tonight with me, Abu Bakar Abdullahi. Thank you for staying with us here on the county's television, TV47. And as earlier promised, let's get to our discussion. We are making sense of the revenue sharing debate, adjournment after adjournment. Will it be fair to describe Senate as a failed house? in reaching a consensus? Those are just but questions we are asking you. Text us on 22047. Remember, you can call in as well on the number on your screen. The hashtag to use is TV47 News. Our guest tonight is Kevin Osido, who is a governance expert. Kevin, good evening, and thank you for making time for us tonight on TV47. All right, Kevin, in Kenya's 2010 constitution, under Article 217, the Senate is mandated to determine the basis of allocation of the national revenue for the counties. This, of course, coming under the recommendations of the CRA, the Commission of Revenue Allocation. Given that Senate has adjourned its sittings 9th time without reaching a consensus, will it be fair to point fingers this time at the Senate for failing to show leadership? All right, Kevin Osido is a governance expert. Of course, we are discussing the topic of division of revenue in as far as the back and forth between, in between the Senate is concerned. You can be part of this discussion. Send us a message on 22047. Share with us your thought as a viewer, as a voter, and more importantly, as a Kenyan, in as far as this debate is concerned. We're making sense of course, the revenue sharing formula. Kevin, can you hear me now? All right, it seems as though we will need to reconnect again with Kevin Osido. We are taking a short break to sort that out. We'll be back after this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to TV47 News Tonight with me, Abu Bakar Abdullahi. Thank you for choosing to stay with us. And as earlier promised, let's get to our discussion on the county revenue sharing standoff and bring in our guest, Kevin Osido, who is a governance expert. Kevin, good evening, and thank you for making time for us tonight on TV47.
Good evening to you, Abubakar. Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure.
All right, in Kenya's 2010 Constitution, Kevin, and Article 217, the Constitution specifies that once in every 5 years, the Senate shall by resolution determine the basis for allocation among the counties, the share of the national revenue that is annually allocated to the county level of government. This is a mandate that the Constitution puts on the Senate to determine the basis of the allocation of national revenue among counties. If one is to ask, has Senate, bearing in mind the adjournment, failed in doing so?
True to the fact, Senate has failed in its mandate, as you've rightfully read from the Constitution of Kenya 2010, because remember that what Senate is supposed to do is not just to engage in its mandate, but also to accept a proposal from the Commission on Revenue Allocation.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that is supposed to be done every 5 years, looking at the various determinant factors that, of course, inform our revenue generation and also allocation. And so, as you've rightfully read, the Senate, given its the kind of shenanigans, if I could say, that we are seeing taking place at the Senate, really, in my view, should not have taken us a 12th round for them to be able to agree on a formula which has already been submitted to them. And what they need to do is just to look at it, and if they do not agree upon it, make recommendations and then send it back to the Commission on Revenue Allocation for further guidance, which therefore include thorough analysis based on research, fact-finding, and of course looking at what other jurisdictions and other countries have been able to do in such a scenario, including public participation, which is also guaranteed in the Constitution of Kenya.
All right, Kevin, the subject of this standoff is the revenue sharing formula, which is the third basis and generation in as far as the formula is concerned. We'll come to that a little bit later. Just still on the wide view of this context, is it squarely on revenue, or could there be more than meet the eye in this standoff?
You are right, Abubakar, because we are looking at this happening.
I'm asking Kevin.
Yeah, and I know you're asking, but you're actually answering the question, because from what we are seeing happening, and remember this conversation has been narrowed down into winner takes it all, more or less, to look at it that way, including the conversation around one man, one vote. And you see, when you talk about a vote, it is really, it has to do with politics, siasa. It has to do with, in our case now, it really has to do with 2022 elections. And remember that even as we talk about this, there has been a lot of talks ahead of this particular conversation, which basically was brought forward by the Building Bridges Initiative process. And so you realize that the manner in which the regions were organizing themselves to be able to make submissions and recommendations to the BBI task force is really a pointer to where we are being headed, where the politics of the day is taking the country. And so what is playing within the Senate is precisely the politics of it. And I think the senators are playing in the gallery of the public. And unfortunately, we are more or less left helpless as citizens, whereas the Constitution is very clear around what they are supposed to do. So,
Kevin, you say what
the Senate, in my view.
Kevin, you say what we are seeing in the Senate is politics, a play of politics. How is it politics when senators from both ends are passionately defending, arguing in favor of their counties?
If you look at the body language, including words, certain words used by the very same senators, for instance, Senator Mutula Kilonzo, if I could quote him, said he was asking the Speaker, Ken Lusaka, are you under a threat? Did you receive a call from God? Who is this threatening you? If I could paraphrase the kind of things that he was saying. And so what that therefore means is that even among senators themselves, there are pointers to certain underhands. And if you look at the kind of intimidation that some senators have gone through, it really shows you that there is some bit of political underhands and the unseen hand which is trying to manipulate things in the manner in which they are supposed to be done. Why do I say so? I say so because the Constitution is very clear around what the Senate needs to do when it receives a recommendation from the Commission on Revenue Allocation. And they also have opinions on what they need to focus on. So not to say that we cannot be able to agree. Senators are people who have been given very high standing within the society. They are people who have been voted for by huge numbers of Kenyans. And to get to that level, it means you have something to offer. So I am still convinced that if senators were only able to stop and think about the future of this country, beginning from where we are now, and be able to learn from the lessons from the past and put aside the politics, because what we are seeing is really political in my view. If we can do away with the politics of building bridges in 2022, we can be able to give a formula to Kenyans.
All right, let's talk of the formula and the formula that have been there. The first formula was presented by the then finance minister, who is the current president, President Uhuru Kenyatta. The second formula came into play in 2016 to 2019. The standoff really is on the third basis of revenue sharing. If one is to ask, why is there so much focus, so much standoff in this third formula in contrary to the first and the second?
The reason as to why there is a big standoff is for two broad reasons. One is that in terms of devolution and the role of the Senate, we are growing. And so we are able to learn from our roles and responsibilities and intergovernmental relations and intergovernmental relationships between government institutions such as CRA, among several others, Council of Governors coming into play. But remember that there has never been a time when we had a very smooth sailing formula. Last year, the Council of Governors actually took Parliament to court, if you can remember, and the court made a very strong ruling around how even this particular process that we are actually engaging in right now should be solved, where the court said, if you get yourselves to a level where you are already into the second month of a budget year, and the Senate or Parliament cannot agree on a formula, then you are free to use 50% of resources which you have on your vote on account. But remember,
Kevin, that is the Supreme Court advisory of 2019, isn't it?
Precisely, that's what I'm referring to. And so if you look at even the previous year, we had conversations around revenue allocation to counties, where we had delays in disbursement of resources until when we now go to the second year, 2017-2018 financial year, then questions around opportunities for counties to finance services, where counties are already talking about grants, whether counties could be able to get loans from other countries, whether they could be able to directly engage into granting facilities by friends of Kenya, like embassies and other sources of revenue. So it is not to say that we have not had a very tumultuous relationship or process when we talk about division of revenue allocation. It has always been like that. And the challenge is because we are not learning from past mistakes. And we are also not looking at what else can we be able to do to safeguard the interests, the interest of devolution. Because from a very surfacic level, you can say that there are people who are stringent, who are rather focused on stifling devolution and making it not work. Whereas that is not the case. Why? Because we have institutions and laws that are supposed to safeguard devolution.
Fair enough. Point made, Kevin. The third generation formula creates a nexus between the county revenue and service delivery, hence 1 shilling, 1 person, 1 vote, as some advance it. What is wrong with giving more money to counties that have more people, so that these counties deliver efficient services to their people?
There's nothing wrong with that. The challenge is that money is not sufficient. It's not sufficient because we are talking about around 316 billion, 316.5 billion Kenya shillings against the expectations of what counties can be able to generate on their own without necessarily going back to the exchequer, to treasury. So that's basically referring to on-source revenue. But remember that the formula we are talking about has also been fixed on certain indicators, and these indicators include population, hence the conversation around 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling. The second indicator is landmass. How vast is this county that we are talking about? The third one is, of course, on health, and then the fourth one is on agriculture. But if you look at health and agriculture, these are already devolved functions. So we are not focusing on the resources that are coming directly into health service delivery and agriculture production per se.
Kevin, you say it's not enough in as far as the allocation is concerned. We are talking of billions of shillings, 1.3 Kiambu, 1.2 Nairobi, Uasin Gishu, 923 million shillings. This is a colossal amount of money in as far as trickling down to the counties is concerned, isn't it?
That's a lot of money, but remember that as we are adding to other counties, we are also subtracting from other counties, which is really why there is a serious war at the Senate, because there are senators who are saying, yes, you have a huge landmass, but you have very few people. But we have a small landmass, but yet we have a huge number of people. And so if we were to focus on the people, the counties that are gaining, as opposed to those who are losing, then that's where the conversation is, because we haven't even had, we've not gone into talking about certain funding facilities like equalization fund, which is supposed to be used for counties that have faced perennial marginalization, like frontier counties, some of the coastal counties, among other places. So if we are to look at only the counties that are going to be gaining in this process without looking at the counties that are losing, then we therefore do not focus on the issue of inclusion and equity, because the main issue, which is why the Senate is very much heated, is purely around inclusion and equity. And
all right, Kevin, you bring the question of losers. There are counties that, if this formula is to be implemented as per the recommendation of CRA, will lose, for instance, Wajir County, 1.9 billion shillings, Mandera and Marsabit, 1.8 billion shillings each. There is a public perception, or even the argument for this matter, that these are counties that are losing because they have few people. Some arguing that monies have been allocated to these counties with few people, and there's no trickle-down effect, there's no service delivery to show for, in as far as these monies that have been trickling down to the counties for the last 8 years, 7 years is concerned.
Which is where now the rubber meets the road, because we are talking about huge, colossal amounts of money, but we are not talking about accountability and transparency. And the second thing we are not talking about is on-source revenue, which is why I like this third generation formula, because they're also saying that we will only give you more, especially with special consideration to how much you are also able to generate, which now is supposed to be the focus of the conversation around what is happening at the Senate, so that we move from looking at how much is my county as a senator losing or how much is my county as a senator gaining, but then we look at what are the locally available opportunities for counties to be able to generate their own revenue. The second issue is, what will it take even for those vastly landmassic areas, rather counties that have huge land masses, what will it take for them to guarantee or to take those services to the people? If you go to counties like Tana River, it's almost 3 counties put together. But
in as far as the land mass is concerned, not necessarily the population of that county.
Exactly. The land mass is more than almost 3 counties, but the total number of population...
Then who is these billions of shillings allocated to if you have few people in these big counties?
Which is where the conversation is. Because they're saying, for example, in Tana River, if you have around 150,000 people, or if you have less than 300,000 people, then why would you need billions of shillings? But if you look at what distances it will take, for instance, for somebody to go and visit the health facility, it might be more than 20 kilometers, which is not even according to universal standards. And so what Senate needs to help Kenyans to understand is how then we arrive at a compromise between counties where it will take you very short distances to access services, as opposed to counties where you have to tread very many kilometers for you to access those services. Of course, it also comes with certain excesses, which also include security. If you look at, for instance, security installations against where citizens or the where the huge population live, then what it will take will be much more lots of resources or lots of amounts of monies for security service providers or security providers to be able to access the citizens where they are living, which is not very true to counties that are much closely knit, where citizens can also be able to access services much more easily.
Fair
and
enough.
we can give that story even to education. We can give the same explanation even for agriculture, which is where I think we are not putting a lot of emphasis when it comes to the conversation around division on revenue allocation.
Kevin, I understand we are out of time. Nonetheless, one final question. Is there a hope of a consensus and a good result, an outcome from the 12-member Senate mediation committee that was formed? Is there a hope?
I can say there is hope. There is a lot of there's a lot of focus, lots of interest in this process. I can for sure tell that there are lots of even civil society networks that are also trying to reach out to the Senate and to the two protagonists in our politics, His Excellency the President and the former Prime Minister, among several other players, institutions such as the CRA, because we have options which have been guaranteed by Constitution and by nature of the assistive legislation. So, if we can be able to allow Senate to retreat and in their wisdom consider having very deep-seated conversations and consultations with other people, including even reversing to the second-generation formula, and then for 1 year, as we learn lessons of why this formula is very difficult to pass. And if those processes are taken into account and that kind of guidance, there's no reason whatsoever why the 12-member committee should not give Kenyans a breakthrough at the end of the day.
All right, Kevin Osido, governance expert, thank you once again for making time for us tonight on TV47.
Shukran.
All right, let's get to some international news now. And Mali's President Ibrahim Keita has been arrested by soldiers in the capital Bamako. The arrest came after soldiers mutinied at the Kati army base outside of Bamako and rounded up a number of senior civilians and government military officials. Keita has faced mass protests since June calling for his resignation over the alleged corruption and was a result. The profit declined from 12 billion shillings to 9 billion shillings compared to a similar period last year. Top line net interest income was up by 17% to 24.6 billion shillings from 21.1 billion shillings the previous year. This, of course, was driven by a 22% growth in loan book from 320 billion shillings to 391 billion shillings. Family Bank has announced a 75% growth in half-year profit to 638.5 million from 364 million last year. The sharp rise in earnings is attributed to greater interest income from higher lending in the period. that brings us to the end of tonight's edition of TV47 News Tonight with me, Abu Bakar Abdullahi. As always, on behalf of the entire team that made this production possible. Bye for now. Enjoy the rest of our programs tonight of all nights. Good night and God bless.